Hey everybody, welcome to CSE, College Students for the Environment. That's right, we're out here advocating for the environment at Viterbo University. So, hello, I'm one of your hosts, Mike Joint, and with me are my colleagues,
Olivia Craker.
And Lauren Dolan.
and today we're going to talk about climate change and how it affects the environment and society around us, because those two correlate and they're very important to us. And so today we invited my boy Jared, the R.A. Wilson. What up, Jared?
Hi guys, my name is Jared Wilson. I'm a junior psychology major here at Viterbo and an RA.
Excellent. That's why I asked you, because you're a psych major. So I was like, oh, you know what? Or he's gonna have some good opinions and stuff because you're a psych major and you have good opinions on everything. So anyway.
Hi, Jared.
Hey there.
Jared, what do you know about climate change?
I know not as much as I'd like to know, but I've just things that I've picked up in general. The climate change is kind of it's a huge pervasive issue, but because of like it's non, I don't know how to put it, but it's such a strangely difficult to comprehend concept, both because of depth and also because of its like lack of visibility. Just a lot of things I've heard plenty about. Obviously, we have increasing yearly temperatures on average. We have like melting ice caps and stuff. And I know that a lot of people like to think that climate change can be relegated to something the like of the intemperance of climate. Obviously, it changes, but then some other people, scientists especially, are pretty versed in the fact that, like, yes, climate does change naturally, but there's enough evidence of density of ice in the ice caps and stuff that shows that this isn't just something that's up to chance or up to the day-to-day. It's a pervasive issue.
So I'm gonna jump in real quick. So right out of the gate, do you think climate change is a hoax? It's okay if you do, but do you think it's a hoax?
I do not believe climate change is a hoax. Like I said, a lot of people do think it is, just because it's it seems almost illusory in the fact that it's not like just a clearly visible, clearly like we can just tell kind of thing.
Right, like math.
Yeah, it's not a constant obvious. It's a theory. Like most things, it's a theory, like gravity is. So we can't just look at it and say that it is true, but I think that there's just a host of evidence that gives us that leads us towards a kind of supercorrelation that I've heard, like, people use the term supercorrelation. When you don't know something can be fact, but there's enough evidence that you have to admit that it seems like a truth.
Right. Okay. Cool.
What would you say to the people who don't believe in climate change?
I think that people who don't believe in climate change often are just uneducated on the subject. I think that they fall into a lot of biases that, just from my own psychological perspective, fall into a lot of biases that kind of lead them to accept their own conclusion without taking in all the necessary data. I think that there's things like
okay, boomer.
things like confirmation bias, which really like let you look up research. I air quotes there. Like, they will do research where they will find things that specifically are tailored to their side of the argument and accept that as fact, but not accept other data that leads otherwise. So I think that can be a huge issue that leads to the whole hoax thing.
Okay, so you basically think like people should just like take the time and like read. Basically,
Yeah.
Do you think?
Just open-minded, fair research, I think, is really important to coming to your own conclusion in the end, not just accepting what some people might tell you.
Right, as opposed to just like, it's wrong because I say it is and I don't want to challenge my own beliefs.
Absolutely, I think that's a big problem.
Yeah. What do you think the world's going to look like in 25 years? Like, obviously the world will be round as it is, but do you think there's going to be like bigger, like more intense storms? Because if you notice there's like bigger, like there's more hurricanes. I feel like, I could be wrong, but like from what I've perceived lately, there's like more forest fires, there's more hurricanes, there's more natural disasters than ever. Do you think that could be, I don't know, what do you think it's going to look like?
Yeah, that's actually been an interesting point of study, is like just how climate change is affecting environmental disasters. We've had a rampant increase of forest fires, of hurricanes, tornadoes, and all that. Things that are affected by barometric pressure. It's a really interesting, dangerous form of research. So I do think it's definitely worth looking into more. In the next 25 years, I would expect to see a continuous increase in this because, well, efforts have been made to cut back on like things that are impacting in increasing climate change. I don't think it's happening fast enough or strong enough of which we are reversing that effect. I think it is likely we'll see more of that in the next 25 years.
Yeah, cool.
So the Los Angeles Times article has opinions on why climate change is the worst environmental problem the world has ever faced.
Right. So Christopher Niddle wrote this in back at the end of October, and he's got a huge picture of Los Angeles from farther away, and you can see downtown LA from the suburbs, and there's a huge just cloud of smog in front of it, and you can't see any details in the city other than just smog from all the pollutants that are in the air. So that's very sad. But he talks about how you have pollutants that can be New York City, for example, used to have the same smog issue, but then locally they passed all these ordinances to reduce it, and then now the air is cleaner and it's healthier, and they don't have air like LA or Las Vegas, So if local officials have taken direct action to reduce climate change, why do you think there is not direct action being taken on a global scale?
That's a good question, actually. That's really good. So I do think that, change starts with individuals. It takes people to step up and kind of to lock in that kind of large-scale change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that because it's it can be such a dog-eat-dog world sometimes, that some people might make those positive steps, but there's going to be drawbacks from that. Obviously, industry is going to take a hit if they're going to have to regulate themselves more. So I think that that's a big reason that a lot of people are choosing not to make what might be a good step to fight climate change for the sake of their own economies or their own reasons.
And their personal interests?
Absolutely. Personal interest is a massive factor.
That makes a lot of sense.
Why do you think that public officials won't pass measurements to eliminate pollutions in the future?
That's also interesting. So we can see it's really cool. Well, it's not really cool. It's actually really bad. But we can see when donations are given to certain politicians.
Right.
So through that, we can see when, for instance, a politician receives a $300,000 donation, and then they pass a law that goes against public interest, like telling corporations that they can increase smog, and that's fine. Things like that, they kind of trip your trigger, where it's interesting that you just received that massive donation and then repealed something or enacted something that has a negative impact on most people,
right,
but could impact a business positively, maybe the people who donated to you, and things like that. So I think that leads to be a huge problem with enacting positive change is, again, the private interests.
So without a smoking gun, do you think this is why there are so many people denying climate changes? And how do you think people's minds can be changed?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, it's such a complex and abstract kind of issue where you can't just directly see it. So I think that leads a lot of people to kind of do their own half-assed research, where it's involving confirmation bias and whatnot again, where it's I think that I'm right, so I'm going to find stuff that says I'm right. Things like that, where I think, it leads into that big issue of just not accepting what is most likely instead of accepting what they think is likely.
So the first thing that Duke's talking about is that climate change is daunting, and developing countries, the poor countries, are the ones that are driving a significant portion of it. So as obviously the United States and most of Western Europe are the developed countries, because we already went through this process, especially after World War II and the Depression and all that. So if developing nations are the ones causing a significant amount of pollution, do you think that the nations that have already developed have a moral obligation to find ways to reduce their carbon footprint of the nations that are developing, or at least help them become more environmentally, what is the word? Not necessarily aware, but pro environment, essentially, in their they're developing and find alternative ways that they can safely develop their countries without harming the earth so much?
Mm. Yeah, that's a very, very difficult question, but very important one. I think that what we're seeing a lot is in those smaller countries that are taking those steps, we do have those countries that are so pro-environment, like you said, that they actually are already helping other people who are in need. I know for a fact that Norway actually had, just the last couple of years, they had enacted this large-scale thing where it's a trash-burning kind of furnace, except it also, at the very top of the furnace where the gas would come out, which normally you don't burn, the reason you don't burn that kind of trash is because you can release harmful fumes.
Right,
And then that
you
could,
get like cancer and stuff from that.
yeah, there's plenty of carcinogens, it's bad for the environment, all that. But they actually, because they're so pro-environment, were able to find a way to collect all of the things released in the air from burning the trash and effectively filter that out into harmless substances.
Oh.
And they've been accepting trash from other nations just because it's such a efficient system that they actually were using all of their trash for that and had plenty to spare. So they actually already have been taking that kind of step. So I think if the larger nations, the larger first world countries are taking these positive steps, I do think that they should have some kind of power to step forward. Like America, we like to say that we're the world police and everything. So if we're the world police, you think we would protect the whole world. So we should take those steps too, I think.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think that, like, if you have the means and you have, like, the ability, like, why are you not trying to make a difference?
Absolutely.
So a lot of pollution is from transportation and electricity, which are crucial to people's lives. If renewable energy is effective to limiting pollution, why don't we reinstitute these resources?
Yeah, so renewable energy has been like a point of contention for a lot. It's very important that we do move towards it, because obviously we'll have to at some point or another, because that's the entire point of renewable energy. The other kinds aren't. We'll run out of coal and oil and whatnot. We won't run out of sunlight or like water that's moving. So I do think we should absolutely go towards that. I think, like I said previously with private interests, I believe that has a large part in that, because yeah, solar panels might be a bit more expensive. Yeah, nuclear energy seems daunting and like dangerous, but a lot of research has been done on both of them. They're both very, very safe. Like, I know that there's been scare tactics with like nuclear waste and explosions of nuclear plants.
Ah, yes, Chernobyl.
Yes, like that. Just big things like that turn people away from those kind of things. And why do we do that when we still have coal or oil? But we're going to have to change sometime or another. I think that making the step to the cleaner, safer energies is a good idea now. And I do think that a lot of it's private interest, because like the coal company obviously isn't going to like that if we try to move towards a different kind of energy that they have no experience producing. So I think that that's going to lead into it in a big way.
Wow. Interesting article, like, in comparison to other environmental issues, how severe do you think climate change actually is?
How severe do I believe climate change is?
Compared to other, like, environmental issues.
I think that climate change is a massively severe issue, because compared to other environmental problems we're having, like, there's always going to be different building materials or whatever we can use to fight acid rain, and we already have powerful filtration systems to help with turning polluted water or salt water into fresh water and healthy water. So I think that those are things we already have solutions to, and when the time arises that we might need it, we can just push towards that in a quick, efficient way.
Right, so kind of like how you said, it's just private interests holding back all these like other sources of energy.
Yeah, so I think that because that those are being held back, but we already have potential solutions, if the time ever arises that those ones became like world threats, we would already have ways to kind of work around most of those things. But climate change is such like a world, massive, grand scale thing that we just keep putting off. I think that is even more severe, honestly. Because that's not something we can completely turn around with solutions we already have in a matter of weeks or years or whatever.
Right, because I feel like, not to like bring up weed, but kind of like as far as like implementing change, like how like all these like local cities started implementing like the decriminalization and like legalizing weed, and then eventually their state governments did it, and now it's getting up to the federal level. I feel like that's essentially what has to happen with climate change, to like and kind of maybe go towards the UN. Which, like, obviously countries don't have to go listen to the UN because, like, they can't really police themselves very well, but that's a different conversation. But that's kind of why I thought. Okay, so, Jared, do you think climate change is an example of structural functionism, conflict theory or symbolic interactionism?
I think that climate change is heavily impacted mostly by functionalism and conflict theory.
Mhm.
So I think this because, so in functionalism, it's that all aspects of a society have a function, right?
Right.
So,
Everybody has a purpose.
yeah, everyone has a purpose, everything has a purpose. And in conflict theory, it's that there's going to be consistent class conflict based on distribution of resources. I think both of these are very important because in conflict, like I said, it's about distribution of resources. And with so many private interests that are constantly impacting the ability to fight climate change, that's largely, I think, the issue. If the resources are being hoarded by companies and they're being able to use that money to fight against, like the fight against climate change.
Yes.
Fun term, but yeah, I think that it definitely brings in conflict theory and functionalism. You know, obviously everything has like a purpose. Coal has had its purpose. Hydroelectric currently has its purpose. All that. I think that like it's just the contentions coming from conflict theory.
No, I definitely agree with you because it was, I don't know, just like private interests and like lobbying to the government and your legislatures, and I think that's like a big like issue as far as like the United States as a whole is very like we're not going to do anything about climate change right now because they're paying us not to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Jared.
Thanks,
That's a
Jared.
wrap. Come back next time to learn more about the environment. Until then, thanks for listening.
Peace.